Point of order, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
I seek leave to ask the Minister responsible for charter schools a very specific question regarding charter schools.
Well, of course, the House is a master of its own destiny, and the member is perfectly entitled to seek leave. Whether it's given or not is another matter. Is there any objection to that course of action being taken? There is.
Well, that's a shame, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
That's a shame, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister responsible for charter schools didn't answer a question when he was present in the House, and there was no one on the government side available to answer in the capacity of Minister of Education properly around this particular policy. Because had he have taken on the challenge to answer the question, it would have been simply this: will the policies and procedures for how charter schools are run, managed and delivering educational benefits to students be open to public scrutiny and accountability, or will these terms and conditions be hidden away under sponsor contracts not accessible under the OIA? The Minister is here, didn't refer to it in his opening speech with regards to this bill. We should be concerned. I rise to speak on this charter school bill, Mr. Speaker, which is Acting National's attempt to privatise New Zealand's public education system. We have a fantastic public education system. Sure, more could be done, but not by way of charter schools. This will not be the solution to the challenge that faces this nation to lift achievement for all children, every child in their community, through their local school. It will introduce competition. It will take money from the public purse and privatise the profits. How can that be good for every child in every local community when they are faced now with charter schools? It's the wrong thing to do in a country like ours, where despite the huge inequities that exist in our country, we sit amongst the top 7 of the OECD countries in educational performance. Under Hekia Palata and John Banks, charter schools will see New Zealand lead a race to the bottom of the OECD, because they have fundamentally ignored the systemic challenge in our society to get things moving on the right track for every child that deserves the best opportunity from their education at their local school. You see, Mr. Speaker, Labour believes that a quality public education should be guaranteed to every child from every community at their local school. This shouldn't be aspirational or a goal or an ambition. It's an expectation in a country like ours if we want to assure ourselves that a small country can grow the potential of each and every child, no matter who they are, where they come from, what their socio-economic background. Inequality in a developed country like ours has seen 270,000 children living in poverty, and it's not their fault. There's a growing number of hard-working families who fall into this category and rely on our local schools to deliver to their children an education of a high quality from the time they start school to the time they finish. Charter schools are a simple distraction. They take money from the public purse and privatise the profits with little or no accountability to students, parents or taxpayers at large. In considering this bill, then why are the sponsor contracts not subject to the Official Information Act? Answer that. In considering this bill, parents should be concerned about the real effect about what the government is proposing. Setting up new schools where a sponsor by way of contract negotiates the terms and conditions for schooling provision may sound attractive, but the devil is in the detail. Under the bill, the policies and procedures of a charter school are hidden in these contracts and will not be available to public scrutiny, not via the OIA, not even as a document tabled in this House. And we as parliamentarians should be very concerned, because this is an experiment. It has failed overseas. They bring it into this country, and why are these contracts not being exposed to greater public scrutiny? It's a problem. When taxpayer funds are being used to run these schools with little or no accountability for what or how they do it. The Minister approves sponsors of charter schools who don't necessarily need an educational background to lead learning at those schools. An advisory group will be appointed by the Minister to monitor the progress of these schools in line with the sponsor contracts. It appears that these advisory boards may take over some role of the Ministry of Education. Who knows? These are just some of the aspects of the way in which charter schools will operate, and we should be concerned as parliamentarians, as parents, about the way in which charter schools are intended to operate. No public scrutiny available to them whatsoever. Earlier this year, the Minister of Education said that she believed that teachers made all the difference in improving learning outcomes. Yet, in charter schools, she's letting non-registered teachers deliver education. We had the former Minister of Education in the House today acknowledge that non-registered teachers could teach at charter schools. She failed to make the connection that teacher training qualifications are a prerequisite to being registered, which guarantees that the quality of a teacher cannot be compromised. Yet, one standard for those at charter schools and another for those in the public school system. How do they reconcile that particular dilemma? The teachers in charter schools will get paid a different rate. They're not subject to the same professional standards, yet they still have the same critical influence on children's learning like any other teacher throughout the schools in New Zealand. But why are they being treated differently? My concern, Mr. Speaker, is that the Minister either believes there is value in teacher training qualifications or she doesn't. Right now, she says it's one law for teachers at charter schools and another for those in the public system. She speaks with forked tongue. The government has put the education and safety of charter school children at risk by ignoring the advice of its own officials who said ignoring the advice of its own officials on who should be allowed to teach them. It's unclear what criteria will be used to fund charter schools and the staffing levels that will be agreed to. Will she promote larger class sizes in those charter schools or smaller class sizes? Who knows? Who knows how those staffing levels will be funded? Will these schools receive the same establishment funding as public schools or more? Who knows? It's unclear. The bill doesn't speak to that. Mr. Speaker, there are more questions than answers, and our children's learning is far too important to be used as an experiment for charter schools, a model that has failed elsewhere in other countries being adopted here in New Zealand. Why? The international evidence suggests that charter schools don't work. In 2009, that member says we should do nothing. No, what we should do is strengthen our public school system. Look to the exemplars and the innovations that are already happening, that are delivering outcomes for Māori and Pacific students and all learners, and strengthen the public school system. Not suck money out of public schools, put them into a private model, privatise the profits. We should do more for every child in every country at our local school. But let's look to the international evidence. In 2009, the Centre for Research on Educational Outcomes, which is part of the Stanford University, analysed the scores from across 16 charter schools. They found that while some charter schools do better than the traditional public schools, the majority do the same or worse. Almost 1/5 of charter schools do worse. Mr. Speaker, it is not the way to go in New Zealand. National's agenda for charter schools poses a major risk to our public education system. They won't have to teach to the curriculum that every other child in the public school system has to learn by. In fact, I'm very sceptical about the narrowing of a curriculum through the charter school process, but the devil will be in the detail, and we're looking forward to this bill going to Select Committee. I can only say, as a closing comment, that it's Labour's sincere hope that if this government is genuinely wanting to engage feedback from the public on this bill, that they extend the period of time for which submissions can come to the Select Committee and not rush this bill through in urgency before the end of the year. We are in October, and it would be unfair for public citizens in New Zealand to try and rush through a submission process. Let's give them time to consider it, time to consider the impact of a charter school within the network of public education provision. Let's not rush them, and let's not put on the Clayton's consultation round through the Select Committee. It's Labour's hope that the government will ensure that genuine time is given for submissions to come in, extend that into the new year so that real engagement can occur, because they are sick of being treated like the people of Christchurch, who are still fuming with the guise of consultation that happened down there being steamrolled over, radical reforms being proposed, All for what? So that they can introduce charter schools down in Christchurch. It's simply unacceptable. Charter schools is an experiment. It's failed overseas. It shouldn't be here in New Zealand. Kia ora.